Welcome to episode 7 of Final Fantasy IX Translation Analyses, the long-running series where I compare the game's English translation to its original Japanese script. We've already covered the most interesting tidbits of Disc 1, so in this episode we'll begin looking at Disc 2. Starting with the city of Treno, where Garnet and Steiner become robbers and meet a totally awesome doctor in the process. After parting ways with Zidane and the rest, Garnet and Steiner stumble upon Sina and Marcus, and the latter explains that he's on a quest to save his bro. When Garnet asks who this bro is, he replies with, "There's only one man I call bro, that's blank." In Japanese, Marcus calls blank his aniki, but despite bro being a common translation for this term, the two words actually have a somewhat different nuance, since aniki is used to address someone older or more experienced, or someone who is considered a leader among his peers. It denotes respect and looking up to, whereas bro can very much be used for someone who is your equal in every way. In episode 1 of this series, I mentioned that the way Marcus talks in general suggests he may very well be the newest member of Tantalus, and his particular respect for blank could imply that the latter is quite a veteran in the group. Or maybe Marcus just finds him to be an utter badass for walking around wearing virtually nothing but belts. Who knows? Either way, he's taking it upon himself to save his aniki or bro, and for that he needs a Supersoft, a more potent type of the regular soft item which can cure any form of petrification. The Japanese name of the Supersoft is interesting, so let's look at it. In Japanese, the regular soft has always been called kin no hari, which means gold needle. Those who have played older Final Fantasies like Final Fantasy IV might remember that back then, the item's name was actually called Gold Needle in the English version of the game as well, but at some point in the course of the series, they changed the official translation to soft. But of course, in Japanese, it's kin no hari or Gold Needle to this day, so as a stronger version of the regular item, the Japanese Super Soft is called Hakkin no Hari, literally Platinum Needle. So it's a nice naming scheme with a bit of an upgrade to a more durable metal. Anyway, the Platinum Needle or Supersoft is in Treno, so that's where we're headed. In English, Treno is called the Dark City. In the Japanese version, it's also called the Dark City, in English letters even. But, as is often the case, it has another title. There's one written in Japanese, which is pretty damn cool actually. Nemuranai machi Treno. Literally, the city that doesn't sleep, though a neater translation could be the city that never sleeps. Or, if we want a more concise title, the Sleepless City. On the way to stealing the Supersoft, we meet Baku, and Steiner angrily tells him that he's coming along to watch over the princess during their act of robbery, for that is his duty. This prompts the Tantalus boss to say, "Always talking about your duty. Ain't you got any thoughts of your own?" After which he notes that Steiner hasn't changed even after traveling with Zidane and adds, "Do you even know why you're here?" Now, the Japanese version of this line might just be the most untranslatable sentence in the entire script. Jibun jibun te iinagara, jibun no ne yatsu da na. Ultra literally translated, this line reads, "While saying myself is a guy with no self." So, what's going on here? Well, Baku is referencing the Japanese pronoun that Steiner uses to refer to himself, jibun, which, as we've covered in previous episodes, literally means myself or oneself. But of course, in English, Steiner just says I, like everyone else, so they naturally had to adapt the line. The only way the original line might have worked is if they had given Steiner a recurring verbal tic and had him always say something like, I myself. For example, I myself shall come to your rescue, princess, or Princess, I myself cannot allow you to go. Of course, that will probably sound kinda weird, so I'm not suggesting they should have actually done it, but hypothetically speaking, if they had, then this line of Baku's could have been more faithfully translated as, for example, "You know, you keep saying myself, but you ain't got no self." As in, Steiner doesn't think for himself, so he barely has a self, and thus he shouldn't be using a word like jibun, which literally means myself, as his first person pronoun of choice. It's a pretty cool play on words by Baku, and a clever way to express the problem with Steiner's present way of life. The scene then changes to Kuja talking with his best bud, the auctioneer. Seriously, this guy deserved a name. He's probably the only character in the game that Kuja didn't flip out on or try to kill. Probably because he's such a smooth gentleman. Anyway, in English, Kuja tells him, "It's not over yet. The rest of the vermin must be done away with." This line was quite shortened from the Japanese, which reads, "Tsugi wa suna nezumi kari sa. Mou skoshi kono utsukushii Treno de yatsura no niyoi o toshitai tokoro dakedo ne." We'll be hunting the sand rats next, although I would have preferred to stay a little while longer in this beautiful city of Treno so as to cleanse myself from their stench. Wow! Kuja actually likes and finds beauty in something other than himself. That's kind of surprising, actually. He then talks about seeing Garnet in Treno and says, "It must be fate." Once again, the Japanese line is a bit longer and more nuanced. "Sasuga ni kyou bakari wa kono boku mo unme te mono o shinjiyotte ki ni natta yo." This can be translated as, "Just for today, even I feel like believing in fate." It's interesting that in Japanese, he goes out of his way to point out that he's making an exception when it comes to believing in fate. And I think that makes sense because, after all, Kuja's whole drive in life is to deny and defy the fate that was handed to him. So when he sees something as a hand of fate, it's an exception to the rule, for he's not the type to believe in it. We then return to Steiner, who's having an inner monologue and talking to himself, quite literally in Japanese. See, in English he thinks, "No, I must be patient." But in Japanese this line goes, "Iya, taeru no da. Adareba tostai na yo." Literally, "No, you must endure, Adalbert Steiner." Personally, I think it's funnier to see him addressing himself in his thoughts like that, even using his full name. Rusty's such a dork. Albeit, not a very lovable dork so far, but that's about to change. And in no small part, thanks to the influence of the character that this episode is named after, the good Dr. Tot. In English, upon seeing Steiner, Tot simply says, "Ah, Master Steiner." But as usual, the Japanese line is considerably longer, with him pointing out that he recognizes Steiner from his manner of talking. "Sono muyami ni katakurushii kuchou wa Steiner dono desu na?" That excessively stiff tone. You must be Master Steiner, correct? Damn, first Baku and now Tot. Everyone's letting Rusty have it today. Speaking of Baku, he soon proves to have a certain difficulty in getting Tot's name right, and comes up with various botched versions of it, like Tutsi. However, Tot's name sounds different when said in Japanese, namely, Totto. No, not that Totto. So Baku's failed attempts at getting his name right are also different from the English ones. In Japanese, the first mistaken name is Poppo, the second is Tonton, third is Chichi, fourth is Pippi. So as you can see, after Baku's second attempt, the names begin to sound so different that you start to assume he's just taking the piss at that point and enjoying messing with Marcus, who keeps correcting him every time. I love it. We then go visit Tot's home, where we are gifted with a cute little flashback scene with an adorable child Garnet, and this scene just so happens to be ripe with fascinating differences between English and Japanese, so let's sink our teeth into it, shall we? When Tot starts talking about books, little Garnet says the following in English. "Really? I don't like books." The Japanese line is actually quite different, since in Japanese what she says is that she struggles with difficult or complicated books, not that she doesn't like books in general. At first glance, this seemed like an odd and unnecessary change to make, but after reading Tot's reply, I immediately understood why they translated it this way, because his line is similar to the earlier Baku line, which I called untranslatable, since it once again involves the characters speaking about the first-person pronouns that they used to refer to themselves. So in English, Tot says, "You are a person of dignity. It is imperative that you study hard." In Japanese, Tot also reminds her that she is a person of dignity, specifically a noble, but for a completely different reason. It's because in her comment about books, Garnet referred to herself using the pronoun atashi, which is a feminine pronoun that strains from watashi. It's rarely used in written language, but common in conversation, especially among younger women, as it's fairly informal. So what Tot says in Japanese is that Garnet should not use the pronoun atashi, but rather the one we see her use in the present, watashi, which is much more formal and befitting of a princess. I suppose another solution would have been to have Garnet use some other markedly informal word or even slang that she might have picked up somewhere. But having Tot reproach her for not being the studious type and reminding her of her status as a result is a neat solution as well, and a perfect example of how translation is far from a mechanical affair and requires creative thinking as well. However, this significant change goes on to percolate throughout the remainder of this conversation, since in Japanese Garnet continues to rebel against the use of formal words like watashi, so the translators kept having to adapt the dialogue as a result. In English, little Garnet goes, I know, oh, but I was quite taken by that book you gave me. In Japanese, she goes, Hai, demo, watashi, gohon wa kyomibukaku yomasete itadakimashita wa. In Japanese, her line sounds much more cheeky. First, she replies with hi, which is literally yes, meaning she's being quite flippant and dismissive of Tot's admonishment, and then she acquiesces to his demands and refers to herself with watashi instead of atashi, but watashi is in quotes, implying that she's putting a particular emphasis on it that denotes a certain they're happy kind of tone. But it doesn't end there. In English, she goes on to say, oh yes, that's the one. So there is a book I like after all. Now, of course, since in Japanese Garnet never said she didn't like books, she says nothing like, so there is a book I like after all. That was once again the translator using that as a means of having Garnet act in a manner considered improper. In Japanese, the issue is once again her speech, as she first uses an extremely formal version of the word desu, namely gozaimasu, and then she asks the doctor if that sounds about right for the way a so-called person of dignity should speak. Pretty sassy, ain't she? And we're still not done, as she then says in English, a Gaia globe? I never knew our castle was shaped like a sphere. In the Japanese version of this line, Garnet starts using atashi again, but quickly corrects herself and changes back to watashi. You know, English should just adopt the Japanese language's quirk of having multiple ways of saying I. I think it's a neat concept, and it would be fun to pick one for yourself, plus it will make translators' jobs way easier. Now, at some point, Tot forgets he's not alone and starts soliloquizing about the mysteries of the universe, and in English he says, ah yes, the stars. In Japanese, he uses the word hoshi, which can indeed mean star, but also often means planet. Considering they were just talking about a Gaia globe, I'd say planet was the intended word here, especially since in Japanese, Tot also adds that this hoshi has an energy and a life force, which sounds strikingly similar to Bugenhagen's lecture on Final Fantasy VII's planet, which, incidentally, was also called Gaia. So this may even have been one of the many references to earlier games that Final Fantasy IX is so well known for. And then, just before the flashback ends, we get one more adorable line from little Garnet. Where is my room on this globe? Guess what? In Japanese, she uses atashi again, but completely forgets to correct herself this time. She's too precious. We then return to the present, where Tot tells the princess, please tell me if there's anything I can do. Tot has a rich vocabulary, but his tone and manner of speech are generally quite humble, especially in Japanese, where he also lets the princess know that he's available to help her in any way he can, but with an added drop of that classic Japanese humility in the form of the expression biryoku nagara. Biryoku is a compound word made up of two kanji. Bi is the kanji for slight or scanty, as in small or insufficient, and ryoku is the kanji for power or strength. Literally, the expression means, although my power is small, but its meaning can be more aptly translated as, to the best of my meager ability. But like many remarkably humble people, Tot is a great person, and not only is he an absolute sweetheart to Garnet in this scene, he also plays a key role in Steiner's arc and development by giving him some sage advice in the exchange that follows. The princess is bright, but she is still young and naive. I am concerned about her safety. Please make your own decision on the matter at hand and protect her. I am but a humble knight. I cannot exceed my authority. Is that an honest answer? You may endanger the princess if you keep telling yourself that. Now, don't get me wrong, this exchange is nice in English, but I do feel it's even better in Japanese, as the doctor's last line is phrased quite differently and has a very powerful effect in my opinion. See, in Japanese, Tot tells Steiner, Steiner dono, owakari ka? それは何もしないという判断をしているのですぞ. Do you understand what that means, Master Steiner? If you say you cannot exceed your authority, what you are doing is deciding to do nothing. Basically, Tot is saying that even when you choose to abide by your orders, you are still making a decision of your own. There's still a choice involved, you can't escape that. So, on a deeper level, you are actually always thinking for yourself and making your own decisions, even when what you're thinking is that you should simply follow orders, and so you decide to go along with what others decide. This is deep and puts the responsibility for his actions squarely back on Steiner, rather than just letting him dodge accountability by relying on the excuse of, I am a lowly servant and must always do as I am told, which he so desperately needed to let go of for his growth as a character and as a person. Tot is a wise man indeed, and a totally awesome doctor. And Steiner's response to these words of wisdom is quite awesome too, although, again, I feel the Japanese phrasing was a bit more powerful. In English he says, I shall take note of your counsel. In Japanese he goes, Kimo ni meijiru de arimasu. Kimo ni meijiru literally means to engrave in one's liver. It's an idiomatic expression equivalent to take to heart in English, which in my opinion would have been a more fitting translation, as it sounds stronger than take note of your counsel. Not only that, but notice how in Japanese, Steiner also uses an exclamation point at the end of his phrase, which I think further helps convey how Tot's words of advice touched him deeply, and may have played a significant part in him finally facing reality and questioning his orders. But he's not the only one who's going to start doing that, and in the next episode we'll actually be taking a deeper look at Beatrix's change of heart, and how it differs in English and Japanese. It's pretty interesting stuff that might have a positive influence on your opinion of the character, certainly did for me, so stay tuned, subscribe, and click the bell icon to ensure that you don't miss any future episodes. Alright, see you next time, Chocobros!